the major problem I faced throughout my life before mindfulness was issues around intimacy. As a boy, I never got the girls, and that formed an identity, or should I say, I formed an identity around that. And this led to a stacking of self-fulfilling prophecies. I didn't get the girls as a boy, so I expected not to get the girls. So, of course, as a teenager, I didn't get the girls. And even as a young adult, I didn't get the girls. Well, I kind of struggled through and found some success in dating despite myself. But one of the sinister ingredients in this mix was that even when I got affection, I didn't feel deserving of it. So we're talking about a self-worth issue here. And one of the reasons that all began when I was very young was because I was not talented at the things that mainstream culture valued. I grew up in England, therefore, the cool kids were the kids that were good at football, soccer. And that was not me. I found it easier to fall over a football than I did to kick one. Don't know why. My father played sports in school. He did reasonably well. He was good at rugby at one time. But it never worked out for me, which is kind of odd because what would become my first career would be playing drums, which is a highly coordinated activity. All four limbs going crazy. So who knows why we're each born with these kinds of strengths and weaknesses. That's one of the beautiful things about humanity, is those individual differences. But it was interesting how that lack of talent in that specific area led to this whole decades-long issue around self-esteem and intimacy. This was only solved through meditation. I had an accidental experience in meditation of encountering little Dan. I didn't know it at the time, but there are actually meditative and therapeutic techniques around this kind of thing. It's sometimes called reparenting. It's sometimes called perfect parent meditation. I think there are other names for this kind of process too. And indeed, this process that I stumbled into was intuitive. So I've no idea how closely this resembles those documented methods. But here's what happened for me. I'm sat in meditation, minding my own business, watching the breath, doing a technique called Anapanasati. This is Gautama Buddha's recommended meditation technique. And then up comes a vision of standing at the side of my primary school playground. That's junior school for the rest of you. And I'm alongside my 6-year-old self. And in the UK, kids play an odd little game called Kiss Chase. I actually researched this for an article I wrote one time. And I found out no other country in the world, no other culture in the world has this game among children. It's specific to the UK. And when I considered it from that lens, I kind of thought it's kind of shocking. It's kind of odd that the kids would essentially run around and play tag, but instead of tagging one another, they kiss one another. And you could land a kiss on the shoulder, on the back, maybe on the cheek if you're lucky. But I thought to myself, why are the kids doing this? Where did this game come from? And why does it not show up in other cultures? Well, I didn't find much. But it got me thinking, okay, what are the kids actually doing when they're playing this game? Well, of course, they're imitating. They're imitating older people that they've seen kissing one another. And they're already playing tag, so I guess it's an exploratory kind of game. We know that kids explore through play, and we know that they definitely like to imitate. So that's my suspicion as to where this game comes from. Observing the kids playing this game as a grown-up, coming back into this vision as a mature adult. I was around the age of 30 when this experience occurred. I was able to see why little Dan, who was stood at the edge of the playground, watching apprehensively, I was able to see why he felt confused by this game. And it was so simple for me to realize as an adult why this was. Little Dan had never seen his parents be affectionate to one another, nor anyone else. None of the grown-ups in little Dan's life, though he came from a stable family, none of the grown-ups were really showing affection to one another, which isn't altogether uncommon. But what that meant was, when he saw those other kids imitating the elders in their lives, that was the first time little Dan, myself at 6 years old, had seen that behaviour. So no wonder he felt like an outsider. No wonder. So I approached little Dan, and I put my hand around his shoulder, and I led him over to a little arrangement of benches that were featured on that playground with little flower pots in the corners. And I sat him down and I said to him, "How you feeling?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "What's going on the playground? What's that game the other kids are playing?" He said, "Kiss Chase." I said, "Why aren't you playing?" He said, "I don't think the girls want me to kiss them." I said, "Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't. But they will later, because do you know what? When you're big, when you're grown up, you're going to be a drummer. You're going to play on stage with a really cool band, and there's going to be thousands of people in the audience applauding you. And that's pretty cool. The girls like that." And he smiled. I reached over and grabbed him and gave him a big hug, and I said, "You're going to be okay. It's going to be okay." I said, "I got you." We embraced for a while, and then my vision faded. Following that experience, there was 2 or 3 weeks of integration, kind of reliving that experience and its significance. joining the dots of what I'd seen to a lot of other experiences through later childhood, teenage years, early adulthood, looking back at my experiences in dating and seeing how they were all informed by those childhood experiences of feeling like an outsider when I saw those other kids being intimate. And as I moved through these experiences and shone the light of new wisdom on them, they dissolved. And with it, what I discovered was a self-esteem that was not born of building myself up, but rather was born of ceasing to break myself down. So it was in the absence of this long-held belief that I didn't deserve affection that actually I saw everyone deserves affection. And I'm not special. I'm not the odd one out who somehow doesn't deserve affection. Everyone deserves affection. And I am part of everyone. Not long after that experience, I found that with regard to dating, my attachment to outcome was eradicated, destroyed, dissolved. I'd been engaging in some online dating up until then. And there had been a strong desire for matches to occur, for messages to come back. And I realized, following that experience in meditation and all of this insight, I realized that I didn't even necessarily want the dates on the other side, or that if I did, the whole dating game was messed up by my need for approval. That was the primary motivator I discovered in every date I'd ever been on, in every text message I'd ever sent to a girl. I was just looking for that validation. Absent of that need, my desire for any interaction with a woman to play out in a certain way completely disappeared. And I found that where previously on these dating apps, I'd been able to reach out to a handful of women each day. And then I'd be, looking at the inbox like, has she read it? Has she replied? I suspect some of you know how that game goes. Instead of that, I found I was able to message 40, 50, 60 women in a day. And not once did I look at my inbox. I just waited for a notification to come back. I no longer cared. I also discovered that I was not in it for hookups. What I really wanted was a meaningful relationship, which came as no surprise to me, because as you can probably tell listening to this monologue, I'm a thinker. I like to go deep. So why the hell would I be interested in hookups? I'd been interested in hookups only insofar as they would have validated me. So that fell away too. I also ripped down my dating profile on all of the sites where you can write about yourself. I actually refocused my efforts on those websites because I'd discovered now that I was looking for genuine connection. And where previously I'd hesitated to speak about my interest in mindfulness, now I just wrote honestly about myself. And actually, mindfulness was all I was interested in at the time. So I've got my new profile up. I'm messaging 50 women a day. Within 2 weeks, I receive a message back from my future wife. And she says, "Oh, you're into mindfulness. I'm a psychologist. We have to meet up and compare notes." Which is what we did. And we've never been apart since. So this, for me, in retrospect, is a powerful demonstration of how the need for validation, the need for approval, fucks us up. It sure fucked me up. And when I had that experience in meditation, when I shone the light of wisdom on all of that old conditioning, I freed up enormous energy. I stopped obscuring my natural self-esteem, self-love. And it took me but 2 weeks to find the love of my life. Funny how this shit goes sometimes, hey? I encourage all of you to look deeply within yourselves. Though, as you heard, it wasn't rooting around in my subconscious that led to this healing experience. It was simply cultivating spaciousness and allowing for whatever was to arise to arise. This never did me wrong in my meditative practice. Simply placing my focus on relaxation, rest, spaciousness, and allowing for whatever processing needed to occur to occur. So this is what I recommend. Plenty of other videos on my channel talking about meditation and how to do it. If you have had any experiences like what I just described, I'd love to hear about those in the comments. And indeed, if this story was impactful to you in any other way, I'd love to hear about that too. I've thoroughly enjoyed sharing this story with you, friends. I'll see you next time.